Any posh people in tonight? I'm asking because you might need an interpreter. I am very common. I graduated with a first-class honours degree in design in 1986 from Staffordshire Polytechnic, as it was, Staffordshire University as it became. And 40 years ago, I can't believe that, it seems like last week. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't enjoy it very much. For the first 2 years. I just didn't I liked the learning. I just found myself surrounded by posh people with a lot different backgrounds from me, and I just didn't feel like I fitted in. I blame myself. I thought it was my shyness, my autism, inverted snobbery, imposter syndrome, and I didn't speak to anyone for ages, and that was a mistake. Because I was quiet, people just thought I was aloof. And understandably, I got known as the arty one, which I embraced, because that label had actually helped me at school. I was disruptive at school, I'll admit, and out of boredom and frustration. And if I didn't get sent to the headmaster's office, a teacher would say, "Why don't you do us all a favour and go to the art room? You're happy there." And I was. And if I did get sent to the headmaster, he'd give me a task like, write 1,000 words on the word detention. And I relished that because, well, I thought to myself, at least in my own head, that at least somebody's interested in my expressed opinion. But I mentioned my inverted snobbery, which I have suffered from, and that means judging posh people. And I'd like to undo that and kind of get away from those thoughts and share something with all of you tonight, and that is to be open about art as I've come to know it and I've come to live in it. And it's not usual, or it never used to be, to talk about the mechanics of art. That was always frowned on as kind of taking the mystique away. But to me, that's a complete lie, because art is self-propagating. And dare I say, like love, when you share, you get more, not less. And I'm at an age and a stage where I want to pass things on, and not least to people of my background, where any approach to art, or let alone conversation about art, inevitably leads to feelings of intimidation and irritation and feeling like I'm trying to show off or something. But it's always been incredibly difficult to navigate and find a way of expressing that predicament, to be able to say and convince people of the truth that creativity is more important than literacy. And as an example, words and verbal language come from music and not the other way around. It has to be that way, if you think about it, if you imagine it. And that's always been my path to learning. Well, I'm talking about the imagination. They broke the mould with you. I used to get that one. You ever heard that expression? And I never took that as a compliment, because it's a misnomer to me. Because I come from the pottery, Stoke-on-Trent, the home of British ceramics, and mould making process is pivotal to the production line. And why would you want to break that? And the mould is actually the pivot point. It's where everything hinges, not just in ceramics, but in the bronze casting tradition as well. And the mould makers actually perform a magical act of transformation, or transmutation, as it actually is said properly. Now, a factory worker wouldn't say that, and someone from a council estate full of potters and miners like me certainly wouldn't have said that in the past. But my adventure as an artist and a sculptor has transformed me, and I can use a different language now. And that's what I want this talk to be about. I want to try and explain that world that I've found myself part of, and it's come to be my home. That's what it feels like. When I actually left home, my first real job was at Madame Tussauds as a mould maker, ironically because I'd left Stoke-on-Trent to get away from clay and plaster. And the fact that my dad had often pointed out, as he pointed to a cemetery, there's no one older than 40 in there. And that was silicosis and industrial diseases. Because there were bad conditions people worked in there, man. And my dad was one of those, and it cut his life short. But I moved to London, I went to Madame Tussauds, and at Tussauds, I found a new home from home. And people were lovely to each other there. Tea breaks on the hour. And that's how you make friends, that's how you bond as a team. And I couldn't wait to get to work every day. And the people, the old guys, the senior sculptors, they took me under their wing. And it was such a magical place there. And the workshops were full of casts from the old days, death masks from the French Revolution, copies of classical works, Michelangelo and others. And I'd hear these stories like, Michelangelo would often say that he sculpted the David by removing everything that didn't look like it. Now, that wasn't sarcasm. That was actually true, because Michelangelo spent 3 years throwing tons and tons of stone chippings away to reveal his masterpiece, because the brain works as a negation filter. It's the very basis of creativity, I've found, that everything's already there. You just tune into the transmissions, filter out all the noise, and land whatever it is. And allowing something to present or to be present, to manifest, is what art is to me. And I've heard musicians talk about this. Like Sinead O'Connor, God bless her. I've heard her talk about her creative process. And she would say, I'd wake up with a song inside me, and it'd keep singing itself and singing itself to me until it was complete. And she never worried about forgetting that song, because the good ones needed to be heard and wouldn't shut the hell up until they were expressed. And like the Beatles, when they went to India, they had no recording equipment. So all the songs that they wrote, dozens of them, they had to remember the good ones and wait until they got home to record them. And that happened to be like 4 albums worth. But that's the genius of the Beatles. My statue of the Beatles that I made in Liverpool came from conversations between friends. It was us just sharing stories about them, because all that was nearly gone, all that stuff. You know, the docks around Liverpool were piled high with rusty chains. And the Beatles in the 60s were dead and buried. And I'm not saying we brought them back, but maybe we kind of felt the wave rising like surfers do. And when I sculpted John, it was the first one of the Beatles that I did, I can't even remember sculpting him at all. I can't remember 1 minute of sculpting John Lennon, because I was just so excited to be doing that job. And when we decided to make that statue, and when I say we, I mean me, the foundry, the guys from the Cavern who supported us to make this, the city council, it became immediately apparent that the times we were in needed that statue to happen and compelled it to happen. Because when things are out of joint and people are starting to go astray and society makes a succession of serious errors, like maybe now, then little synchronicities start to appear. And you notice these things. These are the first signs. And they gather momentum, and things start attaching themselves to those, and it gets bigger and bigger until everything aligns in like a big conduit or tube where things can materialize through. You put your attention where your morals are. You gravitate to the people that you can share with, and you follow your values, and that's how art saves us. Now, on a pottery factory, every person on that factory has got specialised skills, the highest skills. Say a cup handler, like my grandma used to be. She knew everything about putting a handle on a cup, where it went, how to do it. And she also knew exactly how that arrived to her, what the person did, the mould of the caster, and the person who followed her, the person who decorated or glazed the cup. She knew everything about that job. And everybody took enormous pride in what they were able to create with each other. But no one would say, that's my cup. And in the Gita it says, you have the right to perform your work and enjoy that, but not the fruits of your work. Because a lot of things have to align for things to happen. I mean, they happen through us. Now, maybe because of that background of family working in factories, I've always enjoyed working with other people and people talking to me while I'm working, actually, and music on and all that. And I think I've figured out recently, scientifically, why that is. It's like if I'm being caught up in a conversation with someone or taken away by a piece of music, then the right hemisphere of your brain, the creative and the imaginative side, is very happy and occupied in that. And that leaves the left side of your brain, the logical, list-making, efficient side, to gather that clay and fashion it into the muscles of an arm or folds of a jacket or something. And I'm thinking, who just sculpted that? I don't know where that's come from. And even weirder, if there's an area that I'm struggling with and I can't kind of figure out everything fits together, I'll switch hands. I'll put the tool in the other hand. And with the tool in my left hand, it's kind of like the right side of your brain steps in and takes over because it can see things as a whole, and it just kind of works out. Now, it's more complicated than that, but what I'm trying to take from this, what you can take from this, is firstly, to talk about it, that's the main thing. But secondly, that these experiences can be formed into tools that you can pass on to other people. And that's a great secret in art, having the right tools. No one talks about that. And I don't just mean physical tools. It reminds me of my favourite insult, which is, "You are talented." Because that undermines all of that hard work. You know, not just my hard work, the hard work of the people who've passed things on to me. And I'm absolutely aware that people before me have physically sacrificed to enable me to be in the position to do what I do, right back to the ancestors. And I take that responsibility on, and I enjoy that, and that's why I'm incredibly glad that I've been invited back to Staffordshire University to sculpt a statue or two here. So to preview that, I'll just tell you one more quick story. In the summer of 1981, I finally gave up my careers master's intention for me to become a naval engineer. I just stopped going to maths. But I didn't drop out altogether, because my engineering tutor and design tutor were incredibly personable, nice guys. And Mr. Wilson used to bring things in from home that he'd made. And I remember once he brought in this fabulous violin that his father had made by hand. And I was inspired immediately to engage in making an electric guitar, which I managed to sufficiently to make the kind of amplified noise that was necessary to be in a punk band. And in August of that year, I went to see the loudest band on the planet, with 30,000 people, with the loudest PA ever assembled in Europe. It was so loud that the residents of the streets around Vale Park, Port Vale's football stadium, were taken on a series of coaches on a free trip to the seaside, to Blackpool, so that it could happen. And the headliners were the legendary Motorhead, who were to go on to sell 150 million albums, the fastest selling live album of all time still, and become a unique cultural phenomenon for the next 40 plus years. And the frontman of Motorhead was, of course, Lemmy, the man who inhabited rock and roll more truly and coolly than anyone else has ever. And Lemmy is from Burslem in Stoke-on-Trent, and that is the statue that I've got the privilege of being able to deliver from Staffordshire University. Before I say Lemmy, I'm going to tell you one more quick thing, and it's a big thing about bringing things back. You see the symbol that's just about discernible there, the Staffordshire or the Stafford knot. And that is in a bit more detail with all the intertwining fibres, which are important. And that is within the Staffordshire hoard from 1,500 years ago. Now, what it is, well, I'll tell you what it isn't. It's not a device for hanging three people at the same time. And it still says that in encyclopedias. I can't believe that. What it actually is a diagram of the helical movement of stars, planets, and celestial bodies through space and time. Because orbits aren't circular, they're spiral. And like them, we get that same opportunity to come back to the beginning, just slightly removed, back to the past, back to the future, with a bit of perspective to enable us to see everything at the same time and as it truly is, infinite. Now go to your rooms and do some art. Thank you so much for listening.